Okay, so here we are on a nice blustery day. I decided it was time to reconstruct my Gremlin. I had flown it the last time and managed to rip off the antenna on my VTX, so the new one just came in. So I figured it was time to reconstruct it and clean it all up and make it all nice and pretty. So this is how I've got mine set up. A lot of people have been asking recently about the flight controller and how to mount the controller and all kinds of other neat stuff. So I'm going to go over that, and hopefully you guys can see and learn a little more about how it affects things and all that neat stuff. So for the prep, I have cleaned off the frame, wiped it all down with alcohol, repainted all my edges. I like to keep my stuff nice and pretty. And cut new Velcro for my battery straps. Custom fit them after flying so many batteries. It works better than those little O-rings. So what I did is I put a double-sided piece of tape the whole length from here to here, and then put my Velcro across that to keep it secure from deforming and pushing up on the flight controller. You want nothing touching any of these wires that it can bounce off of. And then what I did where I'm going to mount the flight controller is I put a second layer of tape, and that's where we're going to start from. So with the second layer tape on there and stuck, just going to peel off the backing, which is always fun with this stuff. The tape I use is the 3M double-sided tape. It's gray with the red plastic backings. So mine's already done and built. You may have to build yours up as you go, but what I want to do, I know mine, I have the XT30 out the back, so I'm going to, if I can manage to get it to sit still, try to center it on there as best as I can. That way I've got my connector here. This would be forward, and it looks like I've got the flight controller mounted way in the back of the quad, but it's not. Once it's totally built up, you'll see. So I want to make sure that it seats down really good. And the first phase is to get the front motors mounted. To do this, those will go there, and that one will go there. I'll get my little tiny screws, and we will start. First screw is best to put it in the hole. Hold it with a screwdriver. Then align your motor to the first screw. Now, with these tiny screws, so you don't strip everything, always turn it backwards till you feel the click. Once you feel the click, you know you're centered on that first thread, and you're never ever going to strip a motor mount or anything you're screwing things to. And you do that every screw you work with, and you will never in your lifetime strip another screw out. Now leave these loose for now until you get all four in and set, and then once you do that, you can do the tightening. And you see it goes pretty quickly. You're not fighting or struggling against anything. Turn it back, you hear the click. Okay, now just like a tire, you can snug them up till the motor mount seats on the frame. And then what I'll do is I'll take 2 fingers, hold my screwdriver, press it, and then just kind of rock my fingers. You'll feel when it snugs up, and you're not going to snap a screw, you're not going to strip anything out, and they're never going to work loose. Of course, it's always good to check every other flight or so. But for now, we're just going to get these mounted so we're not having the motors flop all over the place. Same thing with the second motor. Get a screw in. Screwdriver up on there. And I don't know if you can see on the camera or not, but I try to keep the motor mount parallel to the frame so you know you're going straight. Again, turn it backwards till it clicks, and it should go right in. Quick, easy, and very repeatable, never doing any damage to any threaded surfaces. Now, this Gremlin is one of the first kits that came out. I ordered it right away, and it's been flying ever since their inception. The only thing I've ever done was not keep track of motor temps when I tried to change props to the A-bands, and I ended up smoking an ESC and a motor. So those were replaced, and it was back to flying great. The whole key to this thing is those wires. Any wires cannot be touching your frame or bouncing around. Your camera can't be flopping around. Several on the forums are talking about going to red bottom motors and bigger motors. For a 2-inch quad like this, this is more than enough. You have to take my word for that, because everybody wants the higher kV motors and they want to go faster, but for a 2-inch quad, 2S and 3S, you can fly this indoors or outdoors, and you can be very controlled, very precise, or you can just rip the bejesus out of it and have a blast. I forgot to grab some electrical tape, so I'm going to stop this and pick it up when I get the tape back. Okay, we are back. Alright, 1/2-inch electrical tape. Cut a section probably about 3 inches long and split it in half. Now, what we're going to do is going to lay our wires down nice and neat. So they stay in place. And work around all the obstacles. Bring it back through and around. Now, when I did mine, I left my motor wires full length, and I ran them up between the ESC power wires and up across top of the ESC. That way, if you do break your wires off, you have plenty to work with later. And then when you shrink tube it, it's straight up. It's easily manageable to get to anything for cleaning or replacement. It's just a simple way of doing things. So lay your ESC down, make sure it's not touching your motor, and it fits perfectly over that frame there, so it's really well protected. Stretch your tape just a little bit, and then simple as that. Done is done. And you repeat it for all 4 motors as you go, but we're going to build this from the bottom up. So again, take our motor wires, lay them out nice and pretty, Stick your ESC down. Push your tape up through. And again, a little stretch makes it pull the ESC down better. You want to make sure your heat shrink isn't rubbing on the motor. And done and done. That's your front two motors. Now next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put the standoffs in. Get those up and ready to mount the top part of the frame. Now I went with larger standoffs because of the way I built it. I want everything on the inside and protected. I found out you tend to get a little crazy with these things. They're that much fun, so you end up breaking a lot of VTXs or receivers if everything isn't tucked away and nice and neat. So first thing we're going to do is use the titanium screws. The plastic ones that come with a kit, not really worth the bother. Your first scratch, you end up snapping them right off. And it's just a real pain. These things can take a beating, and you want it as well put together as possible. Less repair time, more fly time. I smash this thing into picnic tables, into trees, into myself, off play sets, you name it. I've crashed into it. And having the anodized standoffs, you can custom build it to make to build your own. It's a pretty simple gig. It's throwing it all back together again. Nice thing about having a carbon fiber frame is it actually gets threaded, so your screws are gripped nice and tight and they never work out. And again, as always, you'll check for vibrations and keep everything nice and tight over time. But simple, easy things like this just make flying more enjoyable. Your craft flies better because it's built better. It'll take more battle damage, so to speak, if you're a fan of Kung Fu Panda, your Gremlin with authentic battle damage. Okay, so we have our 4 screws and our standoffs. Now, for my build, what I do is I take a piece of heat shrink. Yeah, probably helpful if I showed you. It's not long. I heat shrink my antennas to a zip tie. All you do is slide it down there. And that secures your antenna. Now I keep my receiver antennas to the front and my VTX antenna to the rear. That way there's no conflicts, no problems with any interference or anything overriding. And it tends to work out really nice. So we fish the camera wire underneath there. Going to get an idea of where I want the VTX to be. Now you got I'm using the ATX03, and I want to leave that button there to change the power and frequencies to what I want them. And then I'll put my receiver in front of that. Now, before we get to that, notice my ESC power wires are nice and low here, nice and tight, but they're not touching the Velcro, so as that moves around, putting your battery on and off, you're not going to work that loose and create little bump points. Every little tiny bump transfers into these flight controllers, and just makes things a little bit harder. Okay, I'm going to cut off a little tiny piece of double-sided tape for VTX. And that'll go right there. Now you notice I'm putting it behind the button, not over top of the button. Those buttons are very, very fragile. So the less you mess around with them, the better off you are. You can work it onto your components securely. And we're going to peel and press. This is really, really good tape. It's just pain getting that, catching that edge. So you all get to watch me struggle. Alright, so that's that part. Now I know that's gonna mount to the back. Now, if you notice, this is gonna overhang the back here. So I want to get my VTX no further than the standoffs. So for placement, we're going to stick that just in there. That way we have access to the button straight through the back. You'll be able to look underneath and see the channel selections and all that. And again, press it on there nice and tight. And then VTX is going to go right in, or the receiver is going to go right in front of that. So again, struggle to peel off the red backing. And that will go right there. And of course, my XT60 will hang right out the back. So the next phase is to get it all lined up. Oh, got my receiver too far forward. Pulled my wires too tight. So we just move it back again. And if the VTX wires will behave. There we go. Again, test fit everything. Now, you see the receiver power wires can't bounce off the ESC wires off the front. There's room to bring the camera wire right up front here. My other antenna is out of the way. That's down nice and low. So we can put our screws in, secure the top down. And again, just start your screws in. Don't run them all the way down tight until you get all of them started. Nice thing about having the carbon threaded, once you get that first screw in, they all pull right down. And it's a quick, easy deal. Next step is we'll mount the motors in the back so they're not flopping around and damaging wires. And then we'll work our way out to the camera and the other antenna and such. Okay, now we can flip it over, and this is the motor that I fried, and somebody was nice enough to give me a replacement, so the wires were short. So this one I can't do like I did the other ones. So we're just going to have to mount that as is and tape it down the best we can. Again, turn your screws backwards, get that click. And thus the shakes start. Leaning over, trying to work around the camera here. Does not do my neck or back any good. Hey, we win. At least you guys get to laugh. Get some enjoyment out of this and watch me flop around and struggle. As Stingy says, working on Struggle Street here today. So. That's one of the reasons I keep my thumbnails as long as I do, is to grab hold of these little screws. And again, 2 fingers, snug it in, torque your screws to make sure it's a combination of having enough pressure against the frame to keep the screwdriver in the head and without stripping it. And we go on to our last motor. Struggle Street. Yeah, don't ever do damage to your neck. It's amazing how much the rest of your body is affected. And of course it's a lifelong thing. So you have that to look forward to the rest of your existence. Now, if you notice, my front motors are facing up, my rear motors are facing down. I did this intentionally because with the short wheelbase, these things are pretty spastic. So I thought it through and I decided to do it this way for several reasons. One, it gets the props in line better since I use longer standoffs. So the prop line, if you look, are in a better alignment than if they were stacked. If the two flame plates were put together like the original build on the bottom and everything was not protected. So now it's time to tape our ESCs down. So get our tape here. Lay our motor wires flat. Get them to line up correctly. It's going to be hard to get the light in here with that Velcro in the way, but they're going to be stubborn, aren't they? There we go. Now we're getting somewhere. So, tape our wires, lay them in flat, bring it around and push it up. Lay our ESC in there, making sure it's not touching the motor. A little bit of stretch on the tape. And done. At this point, I think I should probably feed that VTX wire through and get it out of the way while I'm right there struggling with that too. I notice all my wires, my signal wires are twisted. That's so we don't get any signal injection from other things. Again, handy dandy forceps or hemostats, whatever you want to call them. Best things for our hobby ever. I've got the connector wedged in there. Struggle Street. Up over top of that. And pull you through. Okay, there we go. Now we're winning. Should have done that before I put the top down. But there, that's out the front and out of the way. We tape our last ESC down. Unfortunately, I just got to tuck the wires back in in an awkward way for this one, because we have short wires. But hey, somebody stepped up and gave me the motor when I was at Flight Fest last year, because we couldn't get them. So I want to thank everybody for helping out and doing what we do and passing things around. So again, make sure wires aren't touching or rubbing. You're not going to get pinched or anything. And that is that. So on to the next part is our camera mount. Now, quick look in there so we can see. Again, no wires are going to be touching or bouncing off of anything. Get a clear shot of everything up and out of the way. Nothing hitting the frame. Now, a lot of people say you should be soft mounting your cameras and stuff. And I found out with this, it's easier and better to not soft mount the camera. One, you can get your tune done a lot better. And two, it's one more thing to not have to worry about. Getting messed up or peeling off because it got wet or dirty or what have you. Now, I use the standard micro swift camera mount, but the screws I used, I had to grind the heads down flat, and I'll show you why once this is mounted. And of course, since the heads are ground flat, you can't use the right tool for the screw. We make do with what we got. Snug those down nice and tight. And you see the fatter part is front. If you put it to the back, if the camera takes a hit, it flips backwards and it shears the connector off right against the front of that frame. So we don't do that anymore. The next thing we're going to do is plug in our camera and make sure your polarities are right and all that. So oh man, seriously? Oh, you see that? The camera on the ATX, or the connector on the ATX03 has been changed. It's not the same size as the originals, it seems. Yep. So I'm going to have to open this thing up and do some solder work. So guess what? We'll be back. Okay, we are back. Alright, to finalize this whole build here, what I've done off camera is I've added a zip tie here and heat shrunk the second antenna for my receiver here, so that gives me 90 degrees on our offset. It gives me separation from the VTX antenna. The VTX antenna is out the back. That is zip tied there to keep that from going anywhere. It keeps it from working over into the props. It keeps it from being disconnected, and if it does get disconnected from there, it doesn't get lost. But what I also did was put a piece of double-sided tape here underneath the tip of that to keep that flat and level, because it's got double-sided tape underneath there. I don't want that very tip on that antenna part sitting unprotected and where it can flex. That's the weak point of these types of video transmitters. They tend to break right at that little nub. Okay, my XT30 connector here is because I fly on 3S. A JST connector on the thin wires will not be enough to supply power properly to this to fly 3S. Okay, so there's my Velcro battery strap and the original rubber pad. The camera is now connected. The wires are tucked underneath. They're not going to bounce off anything. Now, what I was showing you before, the reason you tilt this or mount this so those holes are forward is so you have this play. That connector doesn't hit there. And the reason I ground off the screws, I'm not sure if we're going to be able to catch the angle right, is when the camera hits and goes forward or backwards, with the full cap on those screws, it was hitting those resistors across the bottom and chipping off parts of the board. I was just destroying cameras left and right and couldn't figure out why. That was because those screws were just barely touching. So now I can flip around and never touch unless this gets severely bent. So the angle that I keep on this is I line the top of that connector, if I shot a line down to the bottom of that top plate, and that tells me that's the angle I like flying. So it's easily repeatable, and I can set it there in the field easy enough after crashes, because very little tilt on these has a huge effect on your speed. So again, the only thing left to do is put the props on and power up. Now, here's what I was going to discuss before. With the prop in line, basically the props are where the motors are. That's about the best I'm going to get it in line without having a huge open space here. You know, that may be more perfect, but this thing flies alright, so I don't worry about that little bit of difference. So for props, I use the stock Baby Hawk props, and the fronts will go on normally. So we put those in, and again turn it backwards till it clicks, start it on. Rotation on my motors are normal, inwards from the front, inwards from the rear. Now for balance, you notice there's two props here, so I put the two screws here and here to kind of keep that balance. If you put them here and here, you've got that blade offset and you get the extra weight out here. I found just that little bit makes a difference in vibration and tuning and such. Again, snug them down, 2 fingers tight, and these will spin to the inside. Same thing on the other front. And again, use the 2 holes that are next to the blades. Start it backwards till it clicks. Now, I've had a couple people ask about how the inverted motors in the back work with the propellers, and there's no change at all, really. You set your motor directions up the same way, so they're spinning to the inside. Basically set your props down like they would be for normal flight, with the tops. You see a flat spot on tops and then the hollow spots in the bottom. But basically you leave them that way and you just pop them straight on, just like you're fitting them in. Then you can go on your bottom side and again find your 2 holes for balance. Sometimes magnetized screws can be a pain in the... Sorry, I was off camera there for a little bit. Again, 2 fingers snug. And again, normal prop rotation is going to be turning in, facing up. Just slide it on the shaft. Then you can flip it over and put your screws in. And this is the end of the rebuild. Hopefully there's some little tips and tricks in there that will help you guys doing your Gremlins. Again, the whole idea of the Gremlin is to make it your own. You know, change things up, see what works, see what doesn't. Which is why I did it the way I did it here. It's offset, and if you look, the prop lines are about as best as they're going to get. Instead of having one up here and one way up here, I'm still in clean air because this is below these and facing out the back like that. Now when you crash, normally you're going to tumble forward. So instead of tumbling forward and crashing on top of the motors and the props, I'm hitting the frame. Everything back here is protected. So I don't have to worry about bending or breaking motors or in a crash. The only exposure is a head-on crash with the front motors. Same thing with the camera. But again, this thing's so light, I've dropped this thing from good 50 or 60 feet, just had fail-safe because I broke an antenna and didn't realize it before I started using this setup, and had a fail-safe, and the thing just fell, hit the grass and bounced. Picked it up, dusted it off, and went flying again until I figured out what the problems were. So, one more check. Pitch up, spinning in, pitch up, spinning in, and again in the back, pitch up, spinning in, pitch up, spinning in. When the battery's connected, that's going to be there. There's no way it's going to get in the way or hit the props. With the XT30, it's going to transfer the power to be able to fly 3S. And again, if you find you have problems with your motor wires, you can always shorten these up if need be. This seems to work fine for me. So there we have it. And you've seen the video, so you know how it flies. And that is that. That is my reconstructed Gremlin. Thanks for watching. Hope you guys learned something. Later.